Welcome back, pilots, to another Jetworks build. This one I'll be doing the de Havilland Vampire. Now, usual story, there's a couple of things that I've not done absolutely according to the plan, so just check out the plans that's provided with each build as well. So the first step, central wing brace and gluing it to the fuselage belly panel. So here we are with the centre parts, and I've 3D printed the brace itself, and I'm just marking on the side panels where it needs to be shaved down just to get that nice point, so it's a smooth transition of air. And just be careful when you're using sharp blades, very careful. I actually cut myself in this video. I don't believe it's on the video, but yeah, I cut myself with the blade, so just be very careful when you're using sharp blades. So here we've trimmed it up, and I'm just getting a slight bend curve in it using the edge of the table just to try and match it up with the belly panel, just to get that nice curve. And then just a wee test fit to see how it's going to look inside. And then I'm in with a wing brace there, just measuring it up just to make sure it's nice and flush and smooth at each side. So I'll be using a wee bit of Yoo-Hoo Pour. So just on one side, smudge it together with both, just so there's a small amount of glue on it, but just enough to give you a quick adhesion to it. And then we've got the RX tray, we're going to add that at the same point. On with the brace at the front, both sides together, and giving it a wee squeeze just because it's contact adhesive. I have gave it a wee bit of air time just to let it dry a bit, but I'm just going to use a wee bit of tape just holding it together just to make sure it's nice and tight and doesn't start opening up. Could have did a wee bit better with the curve in the other one. So on the belly panel there's markings there, but something wrong with my printer. It clearly didn't print off the markings on the belly panel. So once that's had a chance to air dry, stick together, remove the tape and just a small amount of Yoo-Hoo Pour on the contact surfaces and add it to the belly panel. As you can see, with that's actually the right hand side. Needs a wee bit of covering, but we can amend that as we go on. So next step's bulkhead 1 and upper fuselage 1 as well. So we're leaving the tab on bulkhead 1, obviously that's there later on in the build, just for balancing it and keeping it level on the build surface. And I'm just going to put some modelling pins just to tack it and hold it in place due to the curve that's on the side panels. A wee bit on the nose as well. Again, a couple of modelling pins just to try and hold it into position, stop it from freeing up. And a good old bit of tape just to help support it and pull it together. Sometimes the modelling pins will ease off, you know, there will be slight separation there, so just using a wee bit of tape just to hold it together. Once we're happy with that, onto the fuselage upper, I think it's 1. Again, small amount of glue in the contact surfaces, smudging it about, and then hold that in place again. I'll just use some modelling pins just to tack it in so I can move on to the next step. So the next step, I'm looking at the EDF. Now I've printed the spar bulkheads and stuff, the EDF mount off fit pretty well. Cut a wee notch in the spar bulkhead piece, or 2 notches, just so that I could let the side mounts of the EDF slide through, and then test fit in the back one. The back one was a wee bit tighter, but yeah, it's printed off really well and it fitted very nicely. So I just put a wee bit of Yoo-Hoo Pour at the front and then some at the back, just so that it glues to the mounts. And I do twist it about a small amount, just so that there's sort of even contact surface all around it. Now this was a wee bit tricky. Obviously get the panel in at the front, sorry, the locating tab at the front. And because the glue was still quite wet and not actually going off, I chose to get a couple of wee bits of masking tape and just hold it up against the belly just so it was nice and flush. And obviously there's a bit of weight here now that the EDF's sitting on it, but as long as it was stuck to the belly panel, I was quite happy with that. I'd already marked up the EDF with the ESC and just made sure that it was turning in the right direction before we get to covering it up and installing all the rest of the pieces. So the next part was for the intake. So I 3D printed this one, and because I've still got the bell mouth on the EDF, I chose to cut off the small flange at the back, slotted it in, and then just where the wing brace holes are, just using a wee carbon fibre rod just to sort of line it up in place. Small amount of hot glue just underneath, just to tack the intake in just so that it's lined up. Once I was happy that that was set and in place and the EDF mount had cured, moving on to the first part of the wing panels. So at this point I chose to put a wee bit of Velcro in there for the battery, just while I've still got easier access. I found that sometimes it can be a bit tricky when it's all glued together and you've got a small space to get your fingers through it. So a small amount of glue on the side panel, just in the contact surfaces, and then just line it up with the bottom. Again, using a couple of modelling pins just to tack it into the belly itself, just to hold it in the right place so it doesn't slide off a touch. And slowly working my way along. There's a wee bit of curve in this as well. I should have really bent it slightly on the corner of the table. And then do the same with the other side as well. Now we just glued the bottom piece. We've not quite glued the top yet. Again, on the printed part, on the plans, sorry, I was missing some key lines for the ESC to cut out, so I just sort of eyeballed it where I want the ESC to go. And because it's I think it's a 50 amp ESC I'm using here, what I've had to do is just cut ever so slightly the wing brace, just so that I've got a wee bit of space and the ESC fits in quite nicely into the slot to help it cool. It was a wee bit longer than I needed. So careful with a sharp blade, and I'm just using a wee hot lamp and just cutting away the 3D printed part, the wing brace, and a wee bit of relief as well just for the ESC wires that I'm going to put through it. And then again just measuring up where I reckon the ESC is going to sit in, and carefully just cut that out as best as I can. It'll take a wee bit of trimming as well once you get it down and the ESC's in place. A wee relief there for the wires. Once I was happy with that, had a wee test fit to make sure it was good, and then chose to glue this in place. So I'm just using a wee spot of hot glue just on the bulkhead mounts and at the front there. Hold it down in place, give the hot glue a chance to cure. And then moving on to the side panels at the top. Obviously we just glued the lower ones in the first part before we added the intake. And obviously looking at the ESC positioning and battery and stuff. Once I've got that panel in, feeding through the ESC, like I say, I've already located the wires, made sure we've got the right orientation for the fan. Just having a wee look, seeing how it sits into the recess there. I'm using a wee bit of hot glue just on the sides, just to tack it in and hold it in place in the printed mount. Sorry, the printed intake. And just a wee bit extra along the sides just to hold it all together. Once that was done, moving on to the next step. Again, I was missing my printer. Obviously, no printing off the lines. So just cutting a wee relief for the ESC wires. Once they're tucked in, I was quite happy with it. A wee bit of glue just along the contact surface of the bottom, not along the whole top, because obviously it's wider. The contact surface is wider than the upper mount one. Small amount of Yoo-hoo, let it air dry a touch. I spread it about a wee bit with a scrap piece of foam. Offer it up, and then once that's done, we're ready to move on to the next step, which is the fuselage sides and the upper. So there's the last piece for the top. Again, just on the next contact surface, not the final piece. Get a wee smudge about. Now the plans do show beveled edges, cuts on each of these parts, including the side panels, but I chose to just leave it, put it on nice and square, and I'll do the trimming and the sanding later on in the build. So I'm just using a couple of batteries just to hold it down. The next step, I think I went on to the canopy support pieces and the nosed. So here's the wee canopy support pieces, just small amount of glue, put them in, very simple. Just try to make sure it's nice and level. So I 3D printed the nose cone in lightweight PLA and the tail cone as well. So put the nose cone aligner in, small amount of glue, and hold it in place and let that cure. Next step should be moving on to the fuselage sides to carry on with that process. And this, I think I did cut a wee bevel edge in some of these pieces just so that it would remind me of what side's the inside and what side's the outside. So again, a small amount of glue in one piece, lay the opposite part together and just get a wee smudge so it's a very thin application. So when you put it on, it should stick pretty well with limited glue oozing out the sides. And again, moving on to the next one. Again, small amount of glue on one side, use the opposite side, smudge it about, and you do get a good contact. And then just at the end there at the bulkhead, just using a wee bit of hot glue just to tack it in place there, make sure it's stuck and levelled up. Gently teasing it over the printed intakes all along the side. And then I'm just using the carbon spar just to hold it in place and make sure that it's, the holes are in the right location. So the forward fuselage upper, the last side panel as well, sorry. Now when these are on, right from the get-go, it looks to take up a lot of the space for the air intake. And it was at this point I realised it would have been better to sand them and shape them before I actually put them on, because there's a lot of fiddling about trying to get into it, trying to get that nice smooth transition for the curve and stuff using the jigs. Next step was the 3D printed exhaust. Again, I've printed this in lightweight PLA. I think it was 2 walls I used. 2 walls and 0% infill, printed out very nice. And we're just lining it up against the EDF just to make sure it was nice and true. And the next step was to do the fuselage upper. I've already got the sides now. At this point I'm choosing to put the fuselage belly on as well. Small amount of glue and smudge that about. Give it a wee chance to air dry and then offer it up to the fuselage underside. Get a good press, make sure it's stuck against it. As there's a wee curve in it, Just, you know, give it a wee bend first, that would probably help. So the canopy upper support, small amount of glue, offer it up in place, smudge it about, make sure there's a wee bit on the front that goes up against the nose cone, and then the last piece of the upper fuselage, small amount of glue, smudge that about. So the next step is the horizontal stabilizer. I chose not to use the carbon fibre spar due to the amount of plane that's after the CG. So I would suggest though, however, possibly using 6x1mm carbon fibre flat bar. That would obviously give you a wee bit additional support with not as much weight as using a carbon fibre tube. So here I am with the elevator, just trimming a wee 45-degree angle at both sides, one on the lower and one on the top, cutting out the slot for the fuselage, cutting out the slot for the servo. Small amount of glue across the bottom part, offer up the top piece, smudge it about so there's an even application. Just to see where I was maybe missing a wee bit, added a wee bit extra glue, and again just smudging about, making sure there's a good surface contact. And at this point I've 3D printed some hinges just out of TPU, some flexible plastic, and we'll put them in place where we're letting the glue dry. Set that off to the side with a weight on it and let that cure. Now some original audio. So I've sanded the elevator, made sure it's moving freely. Wee trimming there once the glue had all stuck. I've layered up the looking for the nose of the aircraft, the left hand side, the boom. So that leaves me the right. So what I'm going to do is I've dug out the servo, where the servo is going to go. So this is just to figure out where I'm putting the wires. And what we'll do is if we take, that's the outside, we take the boom itself, there's the left. So the left goes on there, and then the right side, if that makes sense, that's going to be in there. So then what we'll do is take the cable run, just line that up. That's the outer side that's been sanded. And then we've got the tail boom in our two where it's got the servo cut out, there and there. Just line that up. And then underneath we're going to mark where the servo wire needs to go. So if they're there, you can see that's roughly lined up. For the inner, we need to dig a wee channel down to there, so the servo cable goes through, the extension cable runs up and then out this side and into the wing, if that makes sense. And then the servo cable accessible. Yeah, I think we'll go with that. So we're going to dig that in first before I install the cable run. So as you can see, we've dug a wee channel in. I've got a wee bit of hot glue, just going to secure the servo in there, but making sure it's not straight through to the opposite end. And with the cutouts where took the foam out, I've just sliced it in half, wee spot of Yoo-hoo glue on the top just to cover the servo, and we'll later on sand that just to try and get a nice smooth finish. Obviously a wee bit of filler as well. So the next step is moving on to the tail booms, and like I've said, I've chose not to put the carbon fibre tubes in it, just to reduce the weight that's in the rear of the plane. So again, by following the guide and seeing what one goes on together, I actually made a wee bit of a mess of it. Ended up pulling bits off and putting it back together because I actually did one side the same as the other. So starting with the left hand side, looking at the front of the plane, just layering it up, small amount of glue, smudging it about, and then onto the outer piece. Now I've already feathered off the end of this one, and that's going to be the outer piece looking at the left hand side of the aircraft. That's the tail boom for that. We test fit. Yep, happy that I've built it properly. So it's now moving on to the opposite side, the right hand side as you look at it. And again, starting with the outer piece that I've feathered off at the tail. Small amount of glue, smudge it about. This is the one for the channel to hold the extension cable. And this was a little bit fiddly, if I do say. But got there in the end. Valiant effort. So having a wee look at testing it through, and I thought, right, okay, let's go and get the glue down, get it done. And it was just tricky making sure that the wires in there and not stuck to the glue. So I offered it up, so there's a wee bit of glue on both sides, just to get a better adhesion when I put it down, and carefully making sure the wires in the slot, and then working away along to the end, and just checking to make sure there's still a wee bit of free movement in the servo extension cable. A wee test fit again, quite happy with that. And then we just leave that, set that aside and let the glue to cure. So here I've just marked off a wee, I've got the tail pods, 3D printed the tail pods, and I'm just marking it where I'm not going to be sanding. And then at the sides, these are the wing formers again, so just marking where the wing formers are going to attach. And so that when I get to sanding the tail booms, I'm not sanding way past that and having to add too much filler. Because obviously it's square at the moment, but I'm going to give it a wee sand before I actually put it on the plane, just to make it that wee bit easier. So the next step's moving on to the wing and doing the main wing spar. Now I've measured it out there for my build. It was 182 to 194 millimeters for the main slot to go into the wing bulkhead. So a small amount of masking tape on both sides, remove the slot, and I've got some 30-minute epoxy. Give that a good wee mix up. And I didn't actually use any micro balloons this time, I actually forgot all about it. So just a small amount in there, making sure that each of the wing contact surfaces have glue on it. Offer up the pre-cut carbon fibre spars, a couple of wee weights just to make sure it was nice and flush, that none of the foam has lifted. Naturally, because it's not a whole piece, there's a couple of slots in it, sometimes the foam can twist slightly. So we set that off to the side and let it set. And then the next part is a wing support piece. So obviously there's the foam part, and I've cut out the carbon fibre spars. Think that's, by looking at the plan, 455 millimeters to go the length of the support piece, and also into the fuselage, into the spar support piece that we 3D printed and put in right at the start of the build. So just be using a wee bit of masking tape. I've just got some epoxy on the contact surface, and adding a wee bit extra all the way along it. and then we'll just let that set. And here we've got the elevator being sanded, shaped, servo installed. Tail booms again, I've sanded them so they've got a nice curve around it. And then we're just adding some epoxy to the tail, just where I'm about to install the elevator. As you can see, there's still some pen markings on the tail boom where the wing's going to attach to, and I've not sanded right through it. So let the 30-minute epoxy set, do its stuff, and hopefully we'll have a nice set tail piece at the end of it. So here we've got some, I think it was quarter ounce fiberglass cloth, just cutting a couple of wee strips just to reinforce the wing spar itself. Wee trim, I could have just left it on. So I've got some water-based acrylic, water-based varnish. A wee spot of Yoo-Hoo pour along the foam part of the wing spar, just so there's a good wee contact. Offer it up to the wing plate, and a wee bit glue on the tabs as well. Once that's set and in place, it was time to get some varnish. So I'm using a water-based varnish. Put some on the wing spar first, just so that when I put on the fiberglass cloth it adheres to it. Now the build guide does say to do this independently before you add it to the wing. I've chosen just to crack on and glue it all together and varnish it onto the wing itself. So we've got the wee fiberglass cloth going across the wing spars, and not any excess goes onto the wing itself. Give that a chance to cure, let the varnish set. So make up the tail boom cradle and the wing cradles also by using the plans. These are quite handy. Now, as I have no carbon fibre rod running through it, what I chose to do was just cut a couple of wee pieces of carbon fibre tube, stick at the end so that I've got some form of location pin. There's a location pin marking on the main wing spar itself, but obviously due to not using the carbon fibre rods in the tail boom, there is no actual real way of making sure it's truly aligned to where it should be. So just using a wee bit of hot glue and just tacking in the servo wires. Not a lot, just enough to hold it in place that if I do crash it or if the servo does need replacing, it'll be easy enough to pick out the hot glue. So once the wee rods are set with hot glue, pushing them into the location parts on the wing, sizing it up to see how it looks, get the wee cradle in place. And it all looks pretty good. It's quite happy with how it was. So it was time to just get some epoxy and start setting it in position. Now I've turned it upside down just to use, give an opportunity to put a wee bit of epoxy on the spar bulkhead itself because it sits above the wing. And then just on the end pieces, where the tips goes through the fuselage and into the wing spar support piece, and where it goes into the wing spar bulkhead as well for the EDF mount. Just a small amount of epoxy on each of the tips. Just so when it goes in, I'll set it on the cradle and give the glue a chance to cure. Now just by eyeballing it, looking at slots, make sure it goes through into the wing brace on one side, and then same on the other. And then I was just offering it up, and where the spar bulkhead is, trying to make sure it looks as straight as possible, in line with the carbon fibre rod and the spar bulkhead, so that, you know, I'm trying to get the wing as true as I can by eyeballing it. I'm sure there's other ways, more professional ways or better ways, but that's what I chose to do. And then once the wing has set in place, it was time to move on to the tail boom. So again, just lining it up by using the locating pins. I'm just marking where I'm going to be adding some glue onto the fuselage. Again, using some epoxy just on the underside. I did give these a wee sand as well, so it was nice and flush, so I get a good contact surface. Now, as you can see, I've only did it at the back there. What I have chose to do is get a wee bit of hot glue just up at the front, and this will help tack it into place where it should be. And I'm using a couple of clamps, just to using a wee bit of foam just to make sure I don't make any marks in the tail booms, just so that the wing plate is up against the epoxy on the tail boom. Give that a wee chance to set. I'm just putting a wee touch of hot glue in there, just for a wee bit extra support. Next part is on the wing leading edge supports. So as you can see, I've got the servos installed, I've ran the cables through and stuff. A wee bit of glue on the wing leading edge support pieces on both sides, give it a wee smudge about, and then offer it up to the fuselage. Slide it into position, and I was just using one of the slots there where the wing cradle is, just to line it up to make sure it's in the right location. Pretty simple. Allow the glue to cure, and then on to the centre sections. Now a wee test fit just to make sure it's good, and it was actually nice and tight. I was quite surprised that I'd done a good job there. So again, after the wee test fit, a wee bit of glue on one side, offer up the opposite side and give it a wee smudge. Now I've feathered off the tail parts of it as well. Slide it into position, and I was just making sure I'd pressed it as it was a nice fit, nice and tight, just making sure I'd pushed it right through to the wing plate, and it was making contact there as well. So next step was the wing formers. So I'm just getting them all lined up, so that I don't get confused. Know that it's difficult. And then just one by one, offering them up to the fuselage and putting them into position. Very simple. Use one, keep the separate one for the other side of the wing. As you can see there, I've offered them up. Obviously I've ran the servo cables through now as well. Had to make some allowances for the cables to go through, so as you can see, I'm just cutting wee additional slots in the wing formers. And a wee bit extra one there for the elevator, the extension cable for that. Making sure they're nice and tight and secure against the wing boom as well. And on to the last couple of pieces. I had to trim it there for the carbon fibre tube, the wee locating pin that I put on it as well, because it protruded out with the wing spar. Once they were in place, time to do the same with the opposite side. Actually snapped that one, as you can see, but nothing to worry about. A wee bit of glue won't sort. And obviously just allowing for the wing servos to get through into the fuselage as well. The cables, that's what I mean. So once you've got them on, the next step was to cut out the additional wee tabs in the wing cradle itself so that we can put through the last couple of remaining pieces of the wing formers. And again, just cutting a small relief in this one to allow for the servo cables to run through. Offer it up into position. And I just removed the wing cradle at the time just to make sure it was fully through and in the right position. There we go again, slot in the opposite side. I was just checking that the cables were nice and free. I did spill a wee spot of glue there, so I just wiped up with a rag. So we've cut out the tabs, and now we'll get the mid-wing block on. Again, I've trimmed these ones back just with a blade. I will take it and give it a wee sand so it's nice and flush. Offer them up into position and just let the glue cure on that. Once the glue's cured, I'll give that a wee sand, ready to accept the wing plate itself. Then the next step that was earlier in the video, or should have been, is the wee supporting pieces for the elevator, the ailerons, and ready to accept the wing. So 3mm foam sheet for the wing. I've done the elevator, that's in place, so I'm just using a scrap piece of 3mm foam and just sizing it up just to try and get a template from it. I figured it was probably a bit easier to use a wee bit of foam than a bit of paper, so just roughly trimming round about, trying to get the right size, and then obviously checking the opposite side. Cut out another piece of foam ready to use for accepting onto the plane. Now I've cut a wee 3mm slot of foam just at the top of the intake, and some glue on the wing formers. As you can see, I've sliced it in two using some Yoo-hoo port, and then a wee spot of hot glue just at the front just to tack it down, hold it in place while the Yoo-hoo cures and goes off. It was actually quite a nice fit, I was quite happy with that. Once that was set, just trimming away some of the excess, not all of it, and then carry on, same process with the outer part of the wing cover that we've done. So across the bulkheads, using some Yoo-hoo pour, offer up the wing, give it a wee smudge just to make sure you've got a nice contact. Give it a chance to air dry a slot, and then at the front, the main spar there, where the tail boom is, the bulkheads, I chose to use a wee bit of hot glue, and that way it tacks it down while I let the Yoo-hoo cure around it. Once the Yoo-hoo was cured, it was time to just start trimming up that 3mm piece of foam just to try and get a nice clean edge. At the back there, I was missing a wee bit of Yoo-hoo, so I chose to use some hot glue just to tack it down, and we know it's done. A couple of wee spots again where there wasn't enough Yoo-hoo on, which happens. And then from the underside, carry on just trimming it up just to get as nice as flush fitting as possible. Now obviously I've already made the elevators and the ailerons, the elevators attached. The ailerons have been done. I haven't got that on video, but I'm sure you can understand how to laminate two pieces of foam together and then add the ailerons. Here's the 3mm lower intake cover. 3mm piece of Depron. I was just measuring that up, see how it fits before I sand it and attach it down. And then again, the leading edge, just gently trimming away wee bits, just wee bits at a time, just getting rid of any of the excess before you get to your final finish. Do the same with the opposite wing using a template and slowly work your way along it, and then that's your build complete. Time to remove all the wee additional tabs, get into sanding and shaping, a wee bit of filler, possibly some water-based varnish and stuff before you get onto the paint job. Well, thanks for staying along and watching the build pilots. I hope this may have helped you in some way. I will say, do use the build guides. That's what they're there for. As you can see, I've missed a couple of steps out. as per normal, but I hope this has helped you if you choose to have a look at the build video, and looking forward to seeing some of your vampire builds. All the best, pilots, and good luck in your next venture with building a Jetworks model. Thank you.